The morning light crept through the narrow windows of the research facility, casting long shadows across the sterile white laboratory. Yunji Park stood absolutely still, her fingers hovering just inches above a delicate piece of quantum measuring equipment. To anyone watching, she might have looked like just another scientist starting her day. But Yunji was different, very different. Her deep brown eyes flickered with an intensity that didn't match the calm exterior she worked so hard to maintain. Years of practice had taught her to hide her true self, to blend in, to appear normal. But normal was the last thing Yunji Park was. From a young age, she knew she was different. While other children played with toys and worried about school, she could see things, feel things, that no one else could. Probability wasn't just a mathematical concept to her. It was something she could touch, bend, and sometimes even break. The quantum analyzer in front of her began to shimmer slightly, just a tiny vibration, almost imperceptible. Yunji's breath caught in her throat. She pulled her hand back quickly, clenching her fingers into a tight fist. No, she had promised herself years ago that she would never use her gift again. Her office was a testament to her self-imposed discipline. Neat stacks of research papers covered the desk. Precise notes lined the walls. Everything was organized, controlled, exactly the way she wanted her life to be. Controlled. Safe. A photograph caught her eye. A family picture from years ago. Her parents stood proudly, both respected scientists in their own right. They never knew about her unique ability. No one did. Not anymore. The memory of that day still haunted her. She was just 16 when her gift first fully manifested. During a critical experiment at her parents' research center, she had unconsciously altered the probability of a complex chemical reaction. What should have been a failed test became a breakthrough that shocked the entire scientific community. But Yunji knew the truth. It wasn't skill or luck. It was her. The incident terrified her. The power to change reality with just a thought was too much responsibility, too dangerous. So she made a choice. She would suppress her gift. Completely and totally. Years of training followed. Meditation. Strict mental discipline. She studied quantum mechanics not to explore her ability, but to understand and control it. Every technique, every mental exercise became a way to lock away the strange power that lived inside her. Now, at 32, Yunji Park was considered one of the most promising quantum researchers in Korea. Her colleagues respected her for her sharp mind and meticulous work. They saw a dedicated scientist who followed every rule, who never took unnecessary risks. If only they knew. The computer screen flickered, just for a moment. Yunji froze. She knew that flicker. It was a warning. A reminder that no matter how hard she tried, her gift was always there, just beneath the surface. Outside her window, the research facility buzzed with activity. Scientists walked back and forth, carrying tablets and equipment. Laser systems hummed. Complex machines processed data from experiments around the world. To everyone else, it was just another day of scientific research. But Yunji knew something was coming. She could feel it in the way the probabilities around her started to shift. Something was changing, and no amount of discipline or suppression could stop what was about to happen. Little did she know, her carefully constructed world was about to be turned upside down. The signal came at exactly 3:17 in the morning. Most people were asleep. The world was quiet. But inside the global communication centers, something extraordinary was happening. A series of mathematical patterns began to appear on screens across multiple research facilities. At first, nobody understood what they were seeing. Yunji Park was not asleep. She was working late, as she often did, reviewing complex quantum data when the first transmission flickered across her secondary monitor. Her hand stopped mid-motion. Something was different about these signals. Most scientists would have called their colleagues or started running standard analysis protocols. Yunji did something different. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift, allowing the mathematical patterns to wash over her consciousness. The numbers began to make sense in a way they never would to a typical researcher. It wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Jae-sung Kim, her team leader, found her 2 hours later. The office was filled with complex diagrams, mathematical equations covering every available surface. Yeon-ji sat in the center of this chaos, her eyes wide and focused. "We have a problem," she said simply. Jae-sung looked around the room. Hundreds of calculations, star charts, and probability models surrounded her. What kind of problem? Yeon-ji pointed to a specific set of calculations. This isn't just a random transmission. It's a structured warning from something, or someone, outside our solar system. The transmission spoke of a civilization known as the Void Harvesters. They weren't like the alien invasions people saw in movies. This was something far more terrifying. These beings didn't just attack planets. They consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but cosmic dust in their wake. Their method was cold and precise. They tracked advanced civilizations, studied them, and then systematically destroyed them. Not for resources, not for territory, but because advanced life was somehow a threat to their grand design. Earth was next on their list. The mathematical proof was elegant and brutal. Each equation was like a piece of a terrible puzzle. Civilizations before them had tried to resist. All had failed. The Void Harvesters had never lost a single confrontation in their known galactic history. Jae-sung looked pale. "How long do we have?" Yeon-ji's finger traced a complex calculation. 18 months, maybe less. The global scientific community was about to be turned upside down. But Yeon-ji knew something they didn't. Her suppressed ability was stirring, like a sleeping beast slowly waking up. She had spent years pushing her gift down, hiding it from the world. But now, something fundamental was changing. The probability fields around her were shifting. Tiny quantum interactions were dancing in ways they never had before. Her gift was preparing for something big. Outside the research facility, the world continued as normal. People went to work. Children went to school. Nobody knew that a cosmic threat was heading their way. Nobody except a small group of scientists who were about to bear an impossible burden. Yeon-ji looked at her hands. They were slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the knowledge that everything was about to change. The Void Harvesters were coming, and humanity had no idea what was about to hit them. The global emergency meeting was not what anyone expected. Yeon-ji sat near the back of the massive conference room, her fingers quietly tapping against her tablet. Around her, the world's top scientists and military leaders were arguing. Some didn't believe the transmission. Others were panicking. A few remained calm, trying to make sense of the impossible. Her team leader, Jae-sung, stood at the center of the room. He was presenting their findings, the mathematical proof of the Void Harvester's approach. Complex charts and terrifying probability models filled the giant screens behind him. "We have concrete evidence," Jae-sung said, his voice steady. "The transmission contains not just a warning, but detailed information about the Void Harvester's previous conquests." A general from the United States military leaned forward. "How do we fight something that has never been defeated?" That's when things got strange. The communication system in the room began to glitch. Screens flickered. Microphones crackled with static. Most people would have seen it as a technical problem. But Yeon-ji knew different. Her gift was trying to tell her something. Without thinking, she reached out with her mind. Just a tiny push, just a small adjustment of probability. The main communication screen suddenly cleared. The data became perfectly crisp. Every single image and chart became crystal clear. Nobody noticed her. Nobody saw the slight shimmer in the air around her hands. Jae-sung continued his presentation, now with perfect visual support. He showed images of star systems that had been destroyed. Entire civilizations reduced to cosmic dust. The room grew quiet. The weight of the information was crushing. "We have 18 months, Jae-sung repeated. 18 months to develop a defense against a civilization that has never been defeated. A scientist from Russia raised her hand. Our current weapon systems are useless. Our best missiles, our most advanced defense networks, they would be like throwing rocks at a hurricane. Eunji felt something building inside her. A pressure. A sense of potential energy waiting to be released. Her years of suppression were starting to crack. During a break in the meeting, Jae-sung approached her. "Are you okay?" he asked. He knew her better than most. He could see something was different. "I'm fine," Eunji lied. But they both knew something was changing. That night, in her small apartment, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection seemed different, stronger, more alive. The quantum potential inside her was pushing against her carefully constructed walls of control. She had spent years hiding her gift, years forcing herself to be normal, to be just another scientist. But the Void Harvesters were coming. And deep down, she knew her ability might be humanity's only hope. The probability fields around her began to dance. Tiny quantum interactions shifted and twisted. Her suppressed power was waking up, whether she wanted it to or not. 18 months. Humanity had 18 months to prepare for something that had destroyed countless civilizations, and Eunji Park was about to become more important than she could ever imagine. Something was coming, and she was the only one who could stop it. The first Void Harvester probes appeared without warning. One moment, the solar system was calm. The next, strange geometric shapes began to materialize near Jupiter's orbit. They weren't like any spacecraft humans had ever seen. These were living machines, thinking machines, hunters that moved with a cold, calculated intelligence. Military bases around the world went into high alert. Massive battleships prepared for combat. Satellite networks activated. Billions of people watched their screens, waiting. Eunji was in the Central Defense Command when the first attack happened. Rows of screens showed the incoming threat. Military commanders looked worried. Some looked terrified. The first wave of human defense networks collapsed in minutes. Advanced missiles disappeared before they could reach their targets. Laser defense systems simply stopped working. Entire battleships became nothing more than floating metal coffins. The Void Harvester probes moved with a precision that defied everything humans understood about combat. "We're losing everything," a military commander whispered. That's when Eunji felt it. The pressure inside her was building. Her quantum ability was pushing against her carefully built walls of control. She could see the probability fields around her. They were like invisible threads connected to everything. Most people would see chaos. She saw patterns. Without thinking, she reached out with her mind. Just a tiny adjustment, a small twist of probability. The next missile launch worked perfectly. Against all odds, it hit its target. The Void Harvester probe flickered, then partially dissolved. Jae-sung noticed first. "How did that happen?" he asked, looking at Eunji. She said nothing, but her hands were slightly raised. Just a fraction of an inch, just enough to influence the impossible. More attacks followed. The Void Harvester probes were relentless. They attacked with a technology so advanced it seemed like magic. Entire defense networks crumbled. Military bases went dark. Communication systems failed. But something was changing. Every time Eunji focused, something improbable happened. A failed missile would suddenly work. A broken defense system would activate at the perfect moment. Battleships that should have been destroyed found impossible ways to survive. The military commanders didn't understand, but they didn't care. They were winning. Somehow, they were pushing back against an enemy that should have destroyed them in moments. Eunji knew the truth. She was doing something impossible. She was changing probability itself. Her gift, the thing she had spent years suppressing, was humanity's last hope. During a critical moment, she pushed harder than she ever had before. The probability fields around her began to shimmer. Reality itself seemed to bend. An entire fleet of Void Harvester probes suddenly became vulnerable. Their impossible technology failed. Their cold, calculated attack collapsed. Jae-sung looked at her. His eyes were wide. "What are you doing?" he whispered. Yunji didn't answer. She was too busy saving humanity. The first battle was over, but the war was just beginning. And Yunji Park was no longer just a scientist. She was becoming something more, something that could change the entire future of human survival. The Void Harvesters had no idea what was coming. The secure facility was silent. Yunji sat at the center of a room filled with the world's most powerful people, military leaders, top scientists, government officials from every major country. They wanted answers. Jae-sung stood beside her, a silent support. His presence gave her strength. She knew what she was about to do would change everything. "I'm not just a normal scientist," Yunji began. Her voice was calm, clear. "What happened during the first Void Harvester attack wasn't luck. It was me." The room went completely still. She explained her gift, how she could see probability fields, how she could nudge reality itself. It sounded like science fiction, but the video evidence was clear. During the attack, impossible things had happened. Missiles that should have missed hit perfectly. Broken systems suddenly worked. Ships that should have been destroyed survived. A general from the United States leaned forward. "Are you telling us you can control probability?" "Not control," Yunji corrected. "Influence. Nudge. See the possible paths and make small changes." The room buzzed with tension. Some looked afraid. Others looked excited. A few seemed angry. How could one person have so much power? A Russian scientist spoke up. "This is impossible. Quantum mechanics doesn't work like that." Yunji smiled, a small, sad smile. "Quantum mechanics is stranger than most people understand." She began to demonstrate. Small things at first. A pen rolled across the table without being touched. A projection screen flickered with impossible patterns. Numbers and probability graphs danced in ways they shouldn't. "My ability is dangerous," she explained. "That's why I spent years trying to suppress it, trying to be normal." Jae-sung stepped forward. "But now it might be our only hope against the Void Harvesters." The military leaders began to argue. Some wanted to study her. Some wanted to use her as a weapon. Others were scared of what she could do. A scientist from China raised a critical point. "How do we know this isn't a threat? How do we know she won't turn against humanity?" Yunji's response was simple. "Because I'm human. Because I want to protect our world." The discussion went on for hours. Experts from different fields picked apart her explanation. They ran tests. They asked impossible questions. They tried to understand something that defied normal scientific understanding. By the end of the day, a decision was made. Yunji would be part of the global defense team, but she would be watched carefully. "I'm not a weapon," she told Jae-sung later. "I'm just trying to help." He understood her better than anyone. "I know," he said quietly. The world had changed. Humanity now knew about her gift. The Void Harvesters were still coming, and Yunji was the only one who might be able to stop them. 18 months remained. The clock was ticking, and everything depended on one woman who could bend the very fabric of probability. The training facility was unlike anything Yunji had ever seen. Deep underground, protected by layers of concrete and advanced technology, she worked to understand the full extent of her ability. Scientists watched her through thick glass walls. Machines tracked every tiny movement. Her quantum manipulation was becoming something more than anyone had expected. "We're running out of time," Jae-sung told her one evening. His voice was tired, worried. The Void Harvester main fleet was getting closer. Each day, their probes came nearer to Earth. Each day, the probability of human survival grew smaller. Yunji knew what was coming. To stop the Void Harvesters, she would have to push her ability further than she ever had before. And the cost would be terrible. Her tests showed that each time she expanded her quantum manipulation, something inside her changed. Her body was becoming less human. More. Something else. The probability fields were rewriting her at a fundamental level. "You might not survive," a medical scientist told her bluntly. Pushing your ability to that level could destroy you completely. She understood the risk. To save humanity, she might have to give up everything. Her life, her future, her very existence. Jae-sung watched her carefully. Their relationship had changed. What started as a professional connection had become something deeper, something more complicated. He loved her, but he also knew what she might have to do. There are other ways, he suggested one night, but they both knew he was lying. Her ability was unique, impossible, the only thing that could potentially stop the Void Harvesters. No one else could do what she could do. Training became brutal. She learned to manipulate probability on larger and larger scales. A small room, then a building, then an entire city. Each test pushed her closer to her limits. The scientists discovered something strange. The more she used her ability, the more she changed. Her DNA was shifting. Her body was becoming something between human and pure quantum potential. "You're becoming a bridge," one researcher explained, "between what humans are and what they could be." Eunji didn't care about being special. She just wanted to save her world. As the Void Harvester fleet approached, the pressure increased. Military leaders wanted a plan. Scientists wanted answers. The entire world waited. Her final test came unexpectedly. During a simulation, she pushed her ability further than ever before. The entire research facility seemed to bend. Reality itself twisted around her. Jae-sung watched in horror and amazement. "I might not come back from this," she told him quietly. Her hand touched his face, a moment of pure human connection in the middle of something larger than humanity itself. The cost of saving the world was becoming clear. She would have to give everything. Her humanity, her future, her life. The Void Harvesters were coming, and Eunji was the only thing standing between them and total destruction. 18 months of preparation had come down to this moment, and she was ready. The sky turned black when the Void Harvester main fleet arrived. Massive ships unlike anything humans had ever seen filled the space around Earth. They weren't just machines. They were living technology, thinking weapons that had destroyed countless civilizations before reaching our solar system. Eunji stood at the center of a massive quantum resonance array. Hundreds of scientists worked around her. Massive computers tracked every possible probability pathway. Military leaders watched with hope and fear. Jae-sung was the closest to her. "Are you ready?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her mind was already expanding. The quantum confrontation wasn't like a normal battle. No ships would fire traditional weapons. No soldiers would fight with guns. This was a war of probability, of potential futures, of quantum interactions so complex that normal minds couldn't understand them. Eunji could see everything. Each Void Harvester ship was a complex probability network. Millions of possible actions happening at the same time. Most people would see chaos. She saw paths, choices, opportunities. Her first move was subtle. A tiny push in the probability field of the lead Void Harvester ship. Suddenly, its most critical system became slightly less stable. Just a small change. But in quantum warfare, small changes meant everything. The ship wobbled, just for a moment. Military computers began to track her movements. Every time she pushed, impossible things happened. A ship that should have destroyed an entire continent would suddenly misfire. A critical defense system would fail at the exact wrong moment. She was playing cosmic chess. Each movement was calculated, precise. She could see thousands of potential futures with every breath. Most would lead to human destruction, but she was finding the tiny paths, the impossible routes to survival. "She's rewriting probability itself," the scientist whispered. The Void Harvester fleet began to respond. They understood something was different. Their advanced technology started to fight back, trying to block her quantum manipulations. But Eunji was faster. Hours passed. To most people, it looked like she wasn't moving, just standing there, eyes closed, hands slightly raised. But she was fighting a war more complex than anyone could understand. Jae-sung watched her transform. Her body was changing, becoming something more than human. Quantum energy danced around her. She was becoming a bridge between human potential and cosmic understanding. The first Void Harvester ship exploded. Then another. Then another. Not with traditional weapons, but with impossible quantum interactions that should have been impossible. Yoonji was breaking the rules of reality itself. One by one, the massive Void Harvester ships began to fail. Their perfect technology couldn't fight against someone who could see and change probability itself. "We're winning," Jae-sung said quietly. But the cost would be high. Yoonji was giving everything. Her humanity. Her future. Her very existence. The quantum confrontation continued, and humanity's fate hung in the balance. The world was quiet after the battle. Silence filled the research facility. Scientists moved like ghosts. Military leaders stood frozen. Everyone was waiting. Eun-jae lay at the center of the quantum resonance array, but she wasn't the same person who had started the fight. Her body had changed completely. Jae-sung watched her carefully. Medical scanners showed something impossible. Yoonji was no longer entirely human. She existed in a state between physical matter and pure probability. Her cells were changing. Quantum energy moved through her like blood used to flow. "Is she alive?" a medical doctor asked. Jae-sung didn't answer immediately. "She's something more," he finally said. The scientists began their tests. They discovered incredible things. Yoonji could now exist in multiple states at once. Her consciousness wasn't limited to one place or time. She could see potential futures with each breath. The solar system was saved. The Void Harvesters were gone, completely destroyed. But the price was high. Yoonji had given everything to save humanity. Her body was now a bridge between human potential and cosmic understanding. She could manipulate reality in ways no one had ever imagined. Medical scans showed her DNA had completely rewritten itself. She was part human, part quantum potential, something entirely new. "She's not a weapon," Jae-sung told the military leaders. "She's a new form of life." Some people were afraid. Others were excited. Humanity had just witnessed something impossible. One person had saved the entire planet by changing the very fabric of reality. Days passed. Weeks passed. Yoonji remained in a state between sleeping and waking. Sometimes she would move. Sometimes she would speak in languages no one understood. Quantum energy danced around her body like a living thing. The research team worked day and night. They tried to understand what she had become. Every test revealed something more incredible than the last. She could influence probability with a thought. She could exist in multiple places at once. She could see potential futures. "We're looking at the next step of human evolution," one scientist said. Jae-sung stayed by her side. Their connection was deeper now. He understood her in ways no one else could. He had watched her transform, watched her save humanity. The world began to change. People understood that human potential was far greater than they had ever imagined. One person had shown them that reality itself could be bent. Yoonji wasn't just a hero. She was a message. A message that humans were capable of something more. Something beyond what anyone had ever thought possible. Her transformation was just the beginning. The Void Harvesters were gone. Humanity had survived. And Yeonji Park had become something entirely new. A bridge between what humans were and what they could become. 5 years had passed since the Void Harvester attack. The world was different now. Humanity understood something profound. Human potential was not what anyone had thought before, and it all started with Yeonji Park. She wasn't fully human anymore, but she wasn't something alien either. She was a bridge, a connection between what humans were and what they could become. The research facility had become something more than a laboratory. It was now a place of discovery, of understanding, of exploring the impossible. Jae-sung watched her most days. Their relationship had changed, but their connection remained strong. He was her link to humanity, her connection to the world she had saved. "We're learning," Yunji would say. Her voice was different now. Sometimes it sounded like multiple voices speaking at once. Sometimes it was completely silent. But always, always, it carried understanding. Scientists from around the world came to study her, to learn from her. She showed them things that changed everything they knew about reality. Probability was not fixed. Reality was not solid. Human potential was unlimited. Children born after the Void Harvester attack were different. Something in the quantum battle had changed something fundamental. More children were being born with small abilities. Tiny hints of probability manipulation. Nothing like Yunji, but something more than before. The military had wanted to control her, to use her as a weapon. But she was beyond that now. She was a teacher, a guide, showing humanity a path to something greater. "We are not alone," she would explain to groups of scientists and students. "And we are not limited. We are possibility itself." Her body continued to change. Some days she was almost solid. Other days she was pure energy. Quantum potential moved through her like blood used to flow through human veins. Jae-sung documented everything. Every change. Every discovery. He was her connection to human history. The world had transformed. Countries that used to fight now worked together. They understood something fundamental. Humanity was more powerful together, more potential when united. Yunji had not just saved the planet from the Void Harvesters. She had shown humanity its true potential. "We are not finished," she would say. Her voice would come from everywhere and nowhere. "We are just beginning." The quantum resonance array where she had fought her epic battle was now a place of learning, of discovery. Students came from around the world to understand what had happened. Some saw her as a hero. Some saw her as a miracle. Some saw her as the next step of human evolution. Yunji saw herself as a bridge, a connection between what was and what could be. The Void Harvesters were gone. Humanity had survived, and something new was beginning. The future was not fixed. The future was possibility. The future was human.